All right, so I'm going to start off with some unfortunate news. We did not record this morning session. Not because we couldn't, but because I lost my access to record off Teams meetings. So I spent the past couple hours with IT Ticket trying to regain my access to record. So right now it has been approved and sitting over at OIT to actually re-enable my access to record. So we unfortunately do not have this morning recorded. We do now have Camtasia running on a computer recording because I still don't have access to record. So that's unfortunate because a lot of those were live demos. So there's no real way to watch a PowerPoint. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. I mean, I just had access for the drainage webinar a couple months ago. So between that time period, I lost my access and was not informed. So fun morning. So I apologize for anyone who's watching this recording now, wondering what happened to the morning half. So with that, we'll get started back up. Which, Adam, the recording did start. You started it, right? Okay. Now he can't use that computer. So Kyle was gonna do this next presentation, but he decided he wanted to go on vacation instead. So I said I would do it, but I made him make the slides. So subsurface utility is around mainly around our updates that we just released around what we did to help better show quality levels on our subsurface utilities in our plans. So just kind of background is L&D Volume 4. I don't know if you guys have heard L&D Volume 4. You know, we did make another volume recently, but Section 2200 talks about specifications. So there's a link to L&D Volume 4 if you want to take a look at it. Subsurface utility location services specifications is what's in there. It's based off of ASC 3822 for standard guidelines for investigating, documenting existing utilities. So kind of quick overview. I'm sure most people know the quality levels. Probably people say, oh, level A, B, C, D. When you get utilities, like if you're going to get sewer work done. So D is obviously the least accurate. So it's just derived from just records. C, you're going to correlate that with visible surface features. B, you're going to determine using like surface geophysical methods. And then level A would be like verified by direct exposure. So we don't really have a good way of showing that on our plans, right? If it's just, this is the gas line, this is the water line, right? So this has been kind of on our to-do list for a good couple of years of doing something to help showcase or provide some more feedback on what level SU you got going on. So here's what we did. We basically added a bunch of field codes for the surveyors. So you kind of see there's a screenshot or a table. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but online, people watching that are right in front of their computers are probably really close. Online, people can't see because it doesn't like to advance. Okay. Great technology. All right. So what we ended up doing was we split out the overhead and the underhead, so that you can now code them separately. So before the old field codes, we just basically had these 4: fiber optic, telephone, cable TV, power line. That's kind of all we had. So now there's a O added to the front for the overhead and a U added to the front for underground. We did not do that for gas or water lines. Didn't feel the need for that. So you'll notice that we have those codes, but there's nothing showing the quality level. So how is it going to do that? And we're going to do that through attributes. So there's a screenshot of kind of what the new line styles will look like. So there's a QL and then the quality level after what you normally see. So the CTV for cable TV, there's, a C or QLA for quality level A, or B, C, D, whatever it ends up being. So how did the quality levels get assigned? As I mentioned, it's going to be through attributes. So if you follow the arrows, if you were to look in ORD inside the survey standards, you'll see there is attribute overrides. And so what we're doing is we're saying if the attribute name is quality level with the value of A, override the element template to go and put this different line style, different level. So as long as the survey is putting in that attribute of what level it is, it'll just kind of happen automatically. If there is not that attribute there, then there's no overriding. We did update the defaults to just be D. So the quality level D will show up when you're processing your survey. So there's example, dataset, CSV. I guess if you have the PowerPoint, you could copy that table and make a CSV and play around with it. We did release the standards, all these updates in our last standards or workspace update, so they are out there now. So, but that's kind of what it looks like. We made new levels and new line styles. So to recap everything, in case you didn't hear me, new codes. Those new codes has a new attribute called quality level. Again, if it's not there, it'll just use a default of D. With that comes new levels. So you're going to be able to turn on and off the different quality levels. So you'll see a bunch more levels in there, as well as new line styles for those new levels or new display. The old codes have been removed from the code list for the collectors, but we left it in the dgen lib, so those old codes will still process. We didn't remove them from the survey settings, but they did get removed from those field lists. So you probably want to go and download the new code list and get it into your collectors. I will just kind of make a note. You might want to update standards from dgen lib if you're going back to an older project and you're expecting these quality levels to just show up. As you use things, they get copied into the file. So if you're going back to an older project and you did update the workspace, you're wondering why they're not showing up, you probably need to update from dgen lib to get the updated stuff in there. So some other things while we're talking about field codes is we did add some new field codes, pole-mounted traffic sensor, cultivated field, noise wall, edge of water, and then we added an automatic and manual for mapping control. So those are some new field codes that got added. And so where do you go to get these code lists? On our website. So you can find them in our workspace as well. So if you have the workspace downloaded, you should be able to go to the standard survey files field codes, and you should be able to see them there. If you go to our website, we also have download links, like for Trimble and Leica. You can get our spreadsheet that looks like a screenshot with all the codes spelled out for you. So I don't know how many from the surveyor side are here in this meeting today, but maybe relay that message to them. It's been out there, so hopefully surveyors know about it and it's there. But are there any questions or comments on that? It's pretty straightforward. Just want to make sure you guys were aware of the change. I think overall it's for the best to start showing that quality level. Right. So try not to put you guys to sleep. Anything online? All right. So now for the fun topic of defects and issues. I know this is what everyone was hanging out for, right? So I just wanted to put together just kind of a bunch of things I've noticed that have been defects or issues. And I want to just kind of bring them to your attention. Maybe they don't affect you, maybe they do, but have in the back of your head so you know, hey, that might be a problem. So first, merge to master dropping cells. So this came up in our mapping slide as well as a surveyor pointed out to us as well. That if you are going to merge your reference into the master, if you're going from a 3D model to a 2D model, it will drop all the cells. If you go from 3D to 3D, it won't drop the cells. But so, a surveyor was doing that, and all of the survey cells dropped to individual pieces. So there are a couple workarounds. You can do like the export to 2D. You could copy and paste just select copy and paste, and wouldn't drop them then. So this was introduced in the 24 ORD. It has actually been fixed in the minor update that just came out recently. So it's a problem that came and went away really fast, but it was there. Another issue was snapping geometry to survey points was actually toggling the survey display off of that point. So to work around that, you can just, if you turn off your persist snaps before you snap to the point, it won't turn it off, or just go and turn it back on. So that's in the survey details, but this is more for the surveyors if they're in their survey file as they're doing things and they're wondering why their points are just turning off on them. That is why, and this is scheduled to be fixed in ORD 2025. So the next release should address this problem. This one is also an annoying one. So anyone using 3D parametric head walls that we made, has anyone tried to edit the variables in 24 after you placed it? Oh, because you can't. Somehow the variables are not there to change in ORD 24. So when you place that cell, if you want to go and change in the variables, you can't. Ironically, this is really just an ORD. If you go open a MicroStation, the variables are still there to change. So I do have a workaround. It's not the prettiest, but it's the best I could come up with. Basically, you're going to edit the cell. So if you right-click on it, there's an edit parametric cell, and you choose same component. So what that does is kind of almost like when you activate a reference. So it kind of grays things out. But what you can then do is if you go into your workflow, go to modeling, and go to the constraints tab, there's a variables button. That'll open the variables dialog. And that's where you can see all the defined variables for that parametric cell. Now, what I would recommend is don't edit the variables, but create a new variation, because if you need to place this cell multiple times in the same file, it's the same cell definition. So you'll see there will be some variations already set up, which if you're using standard variation, I guess I should have started with that. Just you can change the variation. But if you got some custom sizing you want to do, what I would just do is right-click, create a new variation, and then in there, just fill out the variables for the size you need. So now you have a new variation, name it whatever the heck you want. And then when you're done with that, just make sure you deactivate that cell editing. And now in the properties, when you select that parametric cell, you can change the variation and your new variation will show up there. So a slight workaround to change those variables. Bentley has told me that this is going to be fixed in ORD 25. So if you're placing those 3D parametric cells, there's my workaround for you. Just edit cell, create a variation, and then just use that variation. So. While we're talking about those, I did want to remind everyone, you probably noticed there are 2 cell files out there for our parametric cells. One says already like 1012 on it, and one doesn't. This was to fix another bug that happened back in 1012 where it decided to flip the math on the wing wall. So instead of being outwards, it's inward on the one side. So we tried to get an answer from Bentley on if a next update was going to flip the math back or leave it the same. I didn't get a clear answer, so we are going to move forward that they're not going to fix it back. And so instead of having the one that says 1012, what we want to do is kind of alleviate that because people think they can't use 1012 because they're in 24. So this issue was introduced in 1012, so we issued this new cell library and said 1012, like, so if you're in 1012, you use this one because it will flip the angle back. So in a future update, we haven't done this yet, but what I plan on doing is taking that one that says 1012 and getting rid of that from the name. So it's like the standard one, and then the older one, just putting 1010 on there. So if anyone's still out there using 1010, they would have to use this older one, but then I think that's a better approach. So everyone uses the right one and they don't send a service question saying, hey, my wing wall's pointing the wrong way. So hopefully in the future they don't flip the sign back, because that's what we had to do. We had to go in and change one of the signs and then it flipped back over. So if you guys notice that in a future update, let me know, and then we can play a game of switching these 2 cell libraries back and forth. But that was a little nuanced. It's not like a huge deal, but now it's not that hard to deal with. But so the next issue is not one you guys are going to like. I don't really have a good workaround. I think it was brought up a little bit the last time, and I said I fixed it. I fixed part of it, but the overall issue still exists. And I'm sure anyone dealing with drainage has seen this, where things just keep showing up on the default level, right? So it is a little dependent on the feature definition. So basically we have 2 sets of feature definitions. One has like a CL on there for a centerline display and one doesn't. The ones with the CL display, you don't notice the problem as much, but the ones without it, you do. And so what's going on is if you're not displaying the center line of the pipe, it's putting it on default level because it doesn't know what level to use. It's not looking at the outer or inner settings that they added. So I do have this in as a defect with Bentley. So I did put together a little table and a column for if you're using the centerline feature definition or the one that displays the extents on which ones are going to show up on the correct level and which ones aren't. So mainly the profile one, since we don't show the center line in the profile view, we just show the extents. Those are pretty much always showing up on default level. But some of them, strangely, like the cross-section ones show up. Some of them just magically show up on the correct level, like the profile 3D cut. All right, that'll show up on the right level. The profile connected conduit, so the circles that show up, I don't know. I have a defect in with Bentley. Hopefully they fix this. I pointed the exact issue out is because if you go in, add that centerline element template back on that symbology, you'll see the levels start just coming in right. So my best workaround is to select the levels or elements and change the levels. Sorry. So that's kind of where we're at with that. I've kind of told Bentley several times, I keep reaching out to them about every month to make sure it doesn't fall off their radar. This is a big one I need fixed. They introduced this extents, and it seems like they forgot about this situation. So sorry if you guys are running into that. I don't really have a good workaround, but now you kind of know what's going on. So why do they keep showing up on default? Now, there were other problems that were causing things to show up on default levels, which I did address those ones, but that was the main one. Another one that you guys probably haven't even noticed, but if you're working on it, you probably want to go and check the outgoing conduit angle. So when you're using the DU item type sync app, you know how it's putting in the direction for you. It's calculating that is this pipe going north from this node. So that is using the conduit angle property. So on a node, you have those conduit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and outgoing properties, the connected pipe properties. And one of those is the angle. So on your node, you can see the angle of any of those connected pipes. And so that angle has always been from the east direction counterclockwise. That's your 0. In an update, somehow they flipped that 180 degrees only for the outgoing conduit. So if you look at your stuff now, you're going to notice, like this screenshot example, conduit 1 direction is W for west and outgoing is also W for west. The reason being is both of those angles are showing up as 180 degrees. So I have a ticket in with Bentley on this, and I was like, I just need to know what you're finally gonna, what way you're gonna go. Are you gonna switch it back? Are you leaving it like this? So I know how to update the math on what this angle was going to actually represent. So that is unfortunate. This is the ORD 24. So if you guys have those tables or annotating, you do want to make sure you go and check that. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you guys hanging. I have a fix for you. So this is just for the outgoing property. All the other ones, they did not change the way they show that angle. So I did get an answer from Bentley, though. They did say that it's not supposed to do that, and they are going to revert it back. So in the next release, this 180 should be 0 degrees if it's going east. So the target to fix in 25. One workaround is you can just go and use the sync app and check on the overwrite, and that kind of turns off the calculation. You get to put whatever value you want. And so the next question you're asking is, why don't you just update the sync app to account for what version you're running, so that if you're running this version, you know the angle is off by 180 degrees and fix it. So that was my first thought as well. But that property doesn't just update when you open, it updates when you touch the node or pipe. So if you start it in 1012, open it up in 24, the angle's still right, or the old way, I guess, until you actually edit that node, and then it gets updated. So I can't make the assumption what version you're running of what value that angle should be. So there's a little graphic if you're wondering how the angles is supposed to be calculated, or how the conduit ones are being calculated. This is 0 degree counterclockwise. That's what the angle is supposed to represent. So I said, okay, why don't I just not use that property? Why don't I just go get the 2 points from the pipe, the start and end point, and figure out the direction myself? And that is what I did. So I have not released this, as I literally coded it yesterday, or 2 days ago. So what I did was I updated the app to have a new calculation method that you can use. And so I only did it for the outgoing. I left the other 5 ones alone the way it's been working. So what I ended up doing was I had to update the item type library, and I had to update the app. So when I push out this update, you will need to go to your drainage base map file and just sync the item type library in your file. That's all you got to do, and then open up the sync app, and it's going to start calculating correctly again. So you'll notice it'll be like a little triangle if the item type library that's copied in your file is not the same as what's in the dgen lib. You'll see a little triangle. If it is, you'll see a green checkbox. So you pretty much just click on it in the item types dialog, and then in the libraries drop down, you just hit update from library, and that'll bring in all the updates that I have. So your next question is, well, how do I really know? what did I change? Like if I just wanted to look at a file, how do I know if it's calculating the old way or the new way? So here's how you can tell. If you go into that item type library and you go into the ODOT storm sand node pipe character calc props setup, that item type is how I set up all the calculations. So if you go and click on the outgoing conduit direction calculation setup and just look at the default value, if you see angle to compass direction, that means it's using the angle property directly to get the direction. If you just see compass direction, that means it's going and using the start and end point of the actual pipe and recalculating the angle and then changing it to the correct direction. So I plan on pushing this out hopefully really soon so you guys can get that. If you want it like right now, just shoot me an email and I can send you the 2 files, and that's all you got to do is just sync the item type and then just run the app again and it'll get the right values. Or if you don't want to do that, you can do the override. So that's kind of, I didn't want to leave you guys hanging on that, so I tried to make an easy solution. If that ends up working out okay, I might just turn all the pipes to use that, so we're not relying on that angle property anymore. But I didn't test the performance. Technically, you just got to do a little bit more work, because now I got to go get the pipe, get the points. But it didn't seem like it was that much of a factor in the file I had open, so if you guys notice it's really slow, let me know, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. Okay, so any questions on that one before I move on? Before you follow your plan, go check those directions, right? Because there's a good chance that your outgoing pipe directions are all off by 180 degrees. So if you're in 24. So I wish I would have caught that one earlier. I thanks to whoever emailed me about it. I forget, I shouldn't have had his name because they're the ones that pointed it out. So next issue, drainage pipes not showing in profile 3D cuts. So this one has been an annoyance for a while. I think most people have figured out what's going on. It's related to the fill and color for pipes that have a defined thickness. So if the pipe doesn't have a thickness in the catalog, it actually shows up. It's not a problem. So it was a little, that's why you're wondering, like, why does it work on some feature definitions and not the others? So any of the feature definitions for the pipes that had a material defined, those have always worked. It's the ones that didn't have material, because the type B, you can use concrete, metal. So I didn't put a material type on it. I just had it show a solid blue color. Boy, did I not realize that was going to cause this problem. So it really comes down to this closed linear settings on the element template. So there's only one element template that has this pipe-p, and it's used on multiple feature definitions. Some of those feature definitions have the catalog with a pipe that has a thickness and some don't. That's why the ones that don't have a thickness never had a problem. All right, I'm getting too in the weeds. But to fix this problem happening in the future, I have removed the closed linear settings from the DGenLib, and it has already been pushed out. So moving forward, you should not have a problem with your 3D cuts in your profiles not showing the pipe. You make a 3D cut, crossing pipe should show up if it's there. So moving forward, that won't be a problem. On the existing files, if you're running into this, just open up your element templates and go into this pipe P and just right-click on these 3 settings and just hit remove. Okay, when you do that, I wish I could say it automatically fixed everything, but unfortunately, you need to trigger each individual pipe to fix itself. So the best I could come up with was selecting it, changing the feature definition, and changing it back. So that's not the best, especially if you got a lot of pipes. But again, it's only the ones that don't show material. It's not all of them, but if you're noticing in your 3D cuts, you're like, why isn't my pipe showing up? It's actually there as a little dot If you look closely, it's there. It's a dot. But this is how you can fix that problem, is just remove those closed zone settings and toggle your feature definition on and off. Again, if you're starting a new project, which I feel like I always say that, it's going to get better for drainage guys once you start a new project, which it really is. When you start a new project in 24, after this fix, it's going to be great. So I'm trying. So if you guys are running into issues with that, feel free to reach out, but hopefully that clarifies it. This one is more of just a pet peeve of mine. So I wanted to get up here and complain about it. Bentley's sick of me arguing with them over this, but if you guys didn't know, there are two name boundary dialogues in ORD. One of them is the correct one. One of them is microstations. And if you're using the ribbon, you might get the wrong one, and then you might reach out to me all confused on why you don't have the right buttons. So if you launch it from the fence tools, you will get the wrong dialog. It'll be this one on the left. There will be none of the civil icons. You won't see the profile groups. If you launch it from like anywhere else, you get the correct one. But if you look, I have a screenshot of the ribbon. Look how small that slider window is. There's a lot of places it shows up. So you very easily could click on it and have it give you the wrong one. I have submitted this to Bentley. I've gone round and round with Bentley. They've told me this works as designed, and I go, that's crap. So Bentley, if you're listening to me, this is not works as designed. And if it is, then you need to rename the name boundary dialog to civil name boundaries so that we know there is a difference, because right now these dialogs have the exact same name. Furthermore, if you're using the wrong name boundary dialog, there is the first button that says create name boundary. When you click on it, it doesn't do anything. It gives you an error message at the bottom saying ambiguous command. Further explaining that this is not works as designed and is not supposed to show up in ORD, is only supposed to show up in MicroStation. So now you know, and I encourage you, if you feel obligated to submit something to Bentley to say that this is not works as designed, I'm not stopping you. So thank you for listening to me. Next, we can talk about it afterwards too. So another issue that came out with 24, which we fixed, but you might have seen or you might still see, depending on what you're using as your pen table. Basically, if you print and you notice all your text has like boxes around it, something changed with 24, and in our I think we were either they fixed something that we were addressing for in our pen table, and now we don't need to address it. Something happened. Basically, Matt had the pleasure of diving in and finding out what was going wrong with this. And so basically, in our pen table for masked text, the fill color needs to be checked off. All right, you check that off on the text mask in the pen table, and that will fix the border problem. So we have fixed that in our pen tables, but if you have used our pen tables and copied them somewhere else and made changes, we obviously can't fix that one. So that's how you fix it. So go in there and just check that off. Or as Matt loves to say, stop using mask text. Right? And you'll hear him later today talk about that.
We made a couple changes to that, and then we had a couple folks reach out with some additional issues with that. So we kind of went back and forth. So there were in the workspace over the past year a few updates to that pen table as we tried to sort out and figure out what you all were doing with all your mask text. So I think we've got it, but if you run into issues, let us know.
So I'm sure quite a few probably saw that when you went to 24 for a short period of time. Another one that I just want to get my soapbox here You know, if you guys probably have seen this, if you dock your feature definition toolbar every time you open a sheet file, you get this annoying pop-up that says unable to run command in sheet or drawing model. Who's seen this? Who's annoyed by this? All right. You're not the only one. So the reason is the feature definition toolbar. If you have it docked and you open a drawing or a sheet model, it gives you this message. So to get rid of it, you got to close that feature definition toolbar, which, mind you, is a toolbar that is designed to be docked. So Bentley says that it works as designed, noting product stability. So there's another one if you guys want to just bombard them saying, just having a toolbar dock should not give me a message every time I open a sheet model. So, but that's works as designed. If you want to get rid of that annoying message, you got to close the toolbar. So that's all I have. I left off some good ones that I've already talked about in the previous webinars. So hopefully you guys now know some things to look out for. We're going to switch over to Josh now. He's going to go over some of our just workspace updates that we have released since the last time we talked. A lot of good ones in there.
All right, so now hopefully some good news. All right, starting off, we've made corrections to and added new codes to our survey zip files. Next, the item type sync app has had a major update with huge performance optimizations and crash fixes. Then the sheet manager has had a bug fix. There was an issue stopping files from being copied out if a reference file was already checked out. And then next, a huge thing that we fixed is the numlock issue with the Notes app. So that has been fixed if you know what that is. And then second, both the Notes app and a CD app now pull data from a FTP site instead of SharePoint. And both have local backup files now located in the workspace that they can read in if it cannot get the data from the FTP site. So you can still use the apps if you're having issues connecting. For the Create Design Files app, we fixed a bug that showed deleted seed files from ProjectWise and fixed an issue where cached deleted files blocked new file creation. Next, for the Indexer app, we fixed a bug that used the wrong name. It was pulling the document name instead of the file name when zipping. We also fixed a bug that deleted the local zip file if the upload to ProjectWise failed. Next, for pen tables, the fill color was disabled to fix masked text printing with borders. And text substitution now shows the plot driver, pen table, workspace, workset, and product. Also, usernames are now pulled from Connect, not Windows. And there was also a file name fix. So it now uses the actual name of the file, not the ProjectWise document name. For the GenSum, we renamed additional description to supplemental description. We also renamed supplemental info to special instructions. We also fixed an issue where sheet numbers were shown as dates during the create GenSum process. And we also updated custom sort to group items under alternative headings now. Another update to note with GenSum is it now highlights yellow for optional and red for required supplemental descriptions. And the special instructions now include required or optional prefixes based on the item's supplemental description status. For the Sheets cell file, we corrected the title sheet specification note to now match section 1302.12.2. Next, we moved named expressions and ribbon customizations from our OHDOT GUI DGN library to our applications DGN library. Another change is that we updated Transoft workflow to support AutoTurn 2024 and Taurus 2025. The workflow also now hides certain Transoft options if no software is currently installed. And now for our OHDOT v2 workspace config, we have updated the logic in it to now check the registry for third-party apps. And we also updated the config loading to pull directly from install locations, so there should no longer be a need to copy files into OpenRoads anymore. Next update is that we updated the OHDOT text dimension styles library to the ORD 2024 schema, and we added a new title text style and favorite for column style annotations. We also added a text favorite for the parcel name. Next, for drainage and utilities library, we defined the color, line style, and weight for all element templates, fixing some display issues. We also set the default element templates for point feature symbologies, fixing incorrect node symbology in the properties dialog. Next, we separated land use feature definitions with its own symbology and templates. And we also changed the compact database prompt frequency from every 10 times you open the document to every 50. Next, we updated the feature definitions library to ORD 2024. We added new levels and line styles for utility, quality levels. So they're line styles for utility quality levels, crop limits, land use, and signposts. We added a feature definition for 2 posts signs back to back. We also created feature definitions for new utility quality levels. And we also made several updates to column style earthwork sheets. And a few general updates that we've made is that we've updated cells, styles, and feature definitions for ORD 2024. We've improved labeling, sorting, and display logic across many of our apps. We've enhanced workflow for Transoft, drainage, and utility features. And we've also fixed some bugs and cleaned up a few unused workspace files. We've also scaled the drainage flow arrow for cells for better readability. Next up, we've added new barrier and shoulder components to the ODOT templates ITL file. And we've also released a major update for the Survey Master. We have also updated our OCCS, OSIP, WMS files for new OGRIP service and added county XSW files. Lastly, we have a few more updates. We have updated sheet seeds to be along with ORD 2024, and we have tweaked drawing seeds and renamed X scale to cross section X scale for clarity. And then last but not least, ORD 2024 has also resolved a crash draw crashing issue on certain problematic devices. So hopefully something in there was good news for each and every one of you.
You looked at getting the flow. Let me read the whole thing first. Yeah, have you looked at getting the ditch flow arrows into cross sections? We create flow up and down, places arrows into cross sections in the right direction. It was nice to get there a way to read the profile. Yeah, I think we looked at it, and I don't know if there was a great way to do that. If anyone has a way, if you want to share it, I'll take it. I know you guys all have, you don't want to share with your competitors, so.
Yes. Oh, you're talking about the ideas portal? I'd have to go look. A lot of times when they tell me it works as designed, they follow it up with submit an idea. So most of them I do, and then I tell them this isn't an idea. It's, I like the ideas portal for if it's used properly. But if it's just for me to say this isn't how it's supposed to work, it's purpose. But I can look. I think I probably did. But to further my cause, I would say that if it's a defect, you should submit a ticket to Bentley. But yeah, I can add all of my defect numbers and ideas to everything I showed. Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. We can all go vote for it. Because that's the most important thing we need fixed, right? Right after a dark theme.
Sorry, I switched. Should have deleted these out. Made a change while we were talking this morning. Okay. So Josh mentioned we made some changes to the cross-section sheets for the Earthwork format. We talked about this back in January or the February user group meeting. So we made an effort back with the January update to update all of the sample plans for the kind of current CAD standard formatting, correct title blocks and fonts and things like that, grids, so that they match the appearance of what our CAD standards are producing now. We ended up getting to the cross sections, and I realized, how the heck is anybody really dealing with this table that was doing the earthwork when you get to things like you'll see in the next couple of slides. So with the July update, to all the standards, L&D. I'll come back to that in a second. We updated the sample plans for the cross-section sheets, as well as some of the workspace updates that Josh mentioned. And I'm going to go into some more detail here, just kind of so you're familiar with it. You probably could figure it out on your own, but I thought so. Because I switched PowerPoints. Sorry. I lost. There we go. Okay, so thanks. Anyways, we set back, or we kind of restored that historical cross-section column format. It's always been on the left and right side for the earthwork and seating. Gee, which one am I on? This is not just a figure of speech. This is how we've done it for 100 years, plus years. I did go just randomly search for some plans the other day. I found some plans from the 1920s that had the same style format. We've carried it through all the way up through 2020. And for whatever reason, we kind of followed Bentley's guidance on that. But
we couldn't do it in the initial release of ORD. The capability wasn't there.
You could have done it.
No, you couldn't offset.
Right.
That's why.
Anyway, volume 3 was never actually changed. So I put a little asterisk there. This change puts it back. So volume 3 is correct again. So if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, this table format is what we were producing for the last several years since we moved over to ORD. And this is kind of the column format that we're getting at. Those are the examples I showed in the last user group meeting. So why did we decide to do it? Obviously, you probably all have your own reasons, or probably already know where I'm getting at with this. This was Bentley's suggestion. I wasn't at ODOT, so that's my excuse when this happened. I'll take JD's word that it couldn't happen or couldn't be done back then. But I took it upon myself when we started looking at those sample plans to figure out a better way to make it happen. But things like adding additional earthwork areas of volumes for like roads for maintaining traffic, or item 204, geotextile fabric, you'll see those in the sample plans. And I just don't know how you could do that with that table. Or when we started looking at how to do that with the table, I know some people have asked. I told just put an extra table at the back of the cross-section set, call it a day. So this hopefully will get us back to making that a little easier. Adding and deducting for drives and intersections and things, that was very difficult with that format. So, and then if you got to add match lines, you'll see in some of the examples that, that's obviously, I'm sure that's been a pain in the neck. They just get in the way. So this was the previous sample plan leading up to this year, or to July. And this is kind of what the new one will look like, or does look like now. So it looks very similar. The grid, the minor grids is really the biggest difference, what you'll see there. So what did we do? Reformatted and created some new drawing seeds, and as well as created some new annotation groups. And to go along with that, we created some new cells for those cut and fill end areas. So the screenshot here shows some blue graphics and some red graphics. So those are just some columns in those cells. When it gets annotated in those drawing models, it shows you where those columns are going to be on your sheet. So you can at least go in, if you have to move things around or add to those, where you're placing it. They are, I made the weight thicker just for this screenshot, but they're construction class elements, so they won't even print. What else are they going to say about them? Oh, and you probably can barely even see them, so hopefully they don't get annoying. So here's where I really want to just make sure to highlight or point out a couple of the things that we did that may cause a little bit of confusion. Hopefully they don't. We renamed that old table format. We didn't want to take it away completely for if you're in mid-project here. So we added a tilde to the name and included the old earthwork table to those names so that they sort kind of at the bottom of the list when you create your name boundaries. And then for the annotation groups, this probably frustrates you just like it does us. Those don't sort very well, but they don't also accept the tilde. So we use the Z on there and included the word old earthwork table. You'll see in that, if you can see the screenshot, none of them sort well. So please pay attention when you're trying to select which one you want to use. And then the new column format, drawing seeds and annotation groups actually just use the same names as what were previously used. So those will be the new kind of defaults. So to kind of make all that happen, we also added I moved all the datum elevations and offsets inside the grid instead of being out. I never really liked that. It seemed to be a waste of space that they were outside. So we stuck them back in. And then that first section, I shoved it all the way down to the bottom of the sheet. We had like an inch or so that was, gap at the bottom. And then I took the sheet totals and just included it in the column so you don't have a little flag sticking out there anymore. And then we decreased the spacing between sections to make an attempt to fit more per sheet. So this was actually a configuration variable change. So this is going to apply to either format. So if you're still kind of using that old format in the mid project, you might see that they're a little closer together. I really wanted to just slam them together and have no space between them. But if I'm sure you've seen a cross section, that top grid, that they can't figure out how to get that top grid to just be an even interval. So I didn't like that idea. So then I just kept it at, I think it's a 1/2 inch. So the name boundary offsets change obviously to fit that format within the new grid. So just be careful there. I also wanted to point out one change that I did intentionally. Probably will drive some people berserk, but it probably would me too. So the left offset falls at an even number, and so that offset value would end up getting annotated. So here in this case, it's be a negative 140 feet. So when that gets drawn or annotated, you have a 140 label that's going to overlap your datum elevation label, say 890 or whatever that might be. And I didn't like that. No one's going to like that. I didn't want you to have to delete it. So if you've done anything in ORD, setting a key station and you set, that's back 100th or 1,000th or whatever, it fixes up your model to do what you want. I decided to try it here, and believe it or not, that little bit of difference causes that to not annotate that label, it does draw the grid line in, interestingly enough. So you can change it if you want. That's kind of your warning though. If those are an even number, whether it's left or right side, you're going to get that annotation there. And I guess just while we're talking about it, you can always change these offsets for your project if you have a wider section to the left or right, as long as the total width matches whatever drawing seed you're using, whatever's available to fit the sheet. You can change those. You don't have to stick to that standard that we have set there. So we took off the PGL, XGL prefixes. I didn't really have any problem with PGL. XGL drove me nuts because it's not really a standard anywhere. The X just came from ODOT standard, meaning we wanted an abbreviation for existing. But to me, it really should be EX if we're going to do it. And again, we did it for 100 years without those on there. So we took them off. Josh mentioned making a new title. I made the title for the station a little bit bigger, just so it was a little bolder. And this is a little nugget for a few of you have asked for minor grids. I did not turn it on by default, but I did add to the annotation groups a definition that's called minor grid. And to enable that, you can just go in and turn on the minor grid line properties for the horizontal and vertical grid lines. Just set it to full line, and those will re-annotate your sections, and that will get that to those minor grid lines to appear. Personally, I kind of like it. Again, that was another decision before I was here. I don't like saying that, but that's, I didn't really want to rehash that conversation. So, and a few folks have asked, and I get it, you're out in the field and the contractors maybe want to see it. It's easier to kind of measure over where a utility might be or whatever. So it's there if you want to use it. So this was the data set that I used to do some testing. And this is kind of the old format. It uses the groups that I have in there is old. So that's what the sheet's going to look like. Again, it's the exact same data set. I cut it with the new column style here. And because of the spacing and whatnot, I'm able to get an extra section on these sheets. I know that's not going to help everywhere. You hopefully, might help save a couple sheets here or there, and you maybe save us some money since you get paid by the sheet, So, what's that? Yeah. Likewise for the offsets I just mentioned, for the I can't think of the name, the spacing for the top and bottom clearance. We set those as what we think is the default that's best. But if you have projects where you need more room at the top or bottom or less room at the top or bottom, you can change those and you'll hopefully get more or less sections on your sheet. So I think you probably know the answer to this. If you're midway through a project, how should we implement this? If you're midway through, continue on with what you're doing. The old annotation groups and stuff were already copied into your files that were created, so there really shouldn't be any conflict there unless you do an update from DGN lib, and then maybe you might have some problems. I'd say if your project is halfway through, just continue with that old formatting. Call it a day. Last thing we want to see is you submitting a mod, and if a district asks, I'm going to tell them not to pay you to redo sheets just because of this change. But if you're starting out, obviously, I'd suggest you go that new format. It will make it a lot easier to do. One potential challenge, and I don't know if it's directly related to this, we had 2 support requests come in. Within a day or two of each other, the users were trying to add sections to sheets that they already had created. I think they were completely unrelated to this, but I can't say for certain. I couldn't reproduce it. But if they were adding new sections to those sheets that are already cut, it seemed to do some weird stuff. So if you run into something like that, let me know. I don't know that I have a great workaround for you other than to my best suggestion would be to manually add those sections onto the sheet, or to just stick a random sheet within, wherever that would go. So it might have 1 or 2 sections on it, maybe out of order. Not the end of the world, but it's better than recutting or starting all over. So JD was talking about some defects. I threw some in here that were specifically related to cross sections. Related to this change, the column format, those text favorites that are used for the end areas and volumes, it's not honoring the center justification. So it's just being left justified. So you would never really notice that in that other table format. Nothing really version specific. I went back a couple releases and tried the same thing. So that was a defect when I sent it over. They acknowledged that. So you'll see that those will be left justified there. I did also notice as you go through, if you don't cut your earthwork or don't run the earthwork end area report, when you cut your sheets, and then when you do annotate it, it appears weird, maybe overlapping the border a little bit. But if you remove the annotations and re-annotate it, it cleans them back up. They're still left justified. Those cells that I showed earlier do have a point in there. If it really drives you crazy and you want to move the text, it is still center justified text. So you can snap to the center and still move it to that point if you really wanted to. 2024, we saw that the cross-section slope ratios were annotating to 2.0 to 1, for example, instead of just 2 to 1. We have an FAQ page if you weren't familiar with this. The last, I guess it's missing the 2024 at the very end of that sentence there, the link. But we found, or we posted some stuff there that were common issues that we kept running into and people were asking about. I have a little workaround if you really don't like the decimal being placed there, but it's kind of all or none. So if you had a 2.5 to 1, it's not going to get annotated. It's just going to get labeled as 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, whichever way it decides to round that particular day. We found when we submit, and I think it was related to those two cases I was just talking about, if you added some sections in 2024 and then you go and use the create cross-section sheets from drawings, so you just do the sheets, not all the drawings again, it's placing that first section way out in space. If you just change the reference and move it back onto the sheet, it's fine, but you'll see that if you have hundreds of sheets. I'm sure it's a pain, but seems to only be if you're recutting them. Anybody else run into that? Good. You guys were just talking about ideas. The ideas portal here, I took some of the ideas that we've submitted or that we've liked related to cross-section since we're talking about it. We still, and I knew someone would ask today about the seating reports. We still don't have any way to do that like we did in Geopack, so that was one that we opened up. The end area earthwork corrections for curvature. Kim pointed that out a while ago. We submitted that. I don't know if it's got any traction, but go vote for it. Interestingly, Bentley reports to us which one of our ideas get votes every 2 weeks when we talk to them, or every month. So after these meetings, those tend to go up. So if you guys go vote for them, I don't know, it might help something. We'll see. The ability to delete specific annotation groups instead of all instances. So we want to be able to delete just the right-of-way annotations if you need to update those, rather than removing all the annotations and then have to redo them all again. Or maybe just your guardrail annotations if your guardrail changes. So, and then I'd really also like to be able to just delete or re-annotate over a station range, maybe 500 feet of your profile change. So you only really need to update, 500 feet of cross section versus 5 miles. Be a heck of a lot easier to do that. The place name boundary, create drawing, top grid. This is what I was talking about earlier. There's an idea for that. Go vote for that one. It has a lot of votes right now. And then split cross-section elements if motto extends outside default width. I think that's related to, this was not one that we created, but I think that's related to adding match lines and such. So, and since I'm here talking about cross-sections, and I've done this in the last few user group meetings, a couple cross-section topics, this is just another reminder that 1310.2 is not changed because of ORD workflows. We're still seeing cross-sections that are including your pavement buildup. The highlighted sentence there, surface. Oh man. The highlighted sentence there, that hopefully you can see it now. Surface, base, and sub-base courses of proposed pavement are not shown. It's never changed. Your section should look like the top there with the smiley face, not like the bottom with the frowny face. What's the matter, Kathy? That's a whole nother, yeah. Yeah. I don't have any problem sending this to them, or yeah.
Yeah, I think it's depending on the district. So there's more separation between the in-house projects and the consultant managed projects. So the more separate those groups are in the particular districts, the more that the ones managing the consultant projects aren't in these meetings or know it's harder to get to them versus the ones that are more closer together.
So on that topic, our templates don't include that subgrade component, and that's somewhat intentional. We were working on adding it. There's just one piece that when you tie it back into the graded shoulder, there's not always something that you're going to have to do to make it work. And it's going to take some effort on our part to either redo a whole lot of other things or really educate everybody who dumps those in that you have to go and set a constraint to make that work. There is a wiki page or a knowledge base that I created that shows you how to add that in with the feature definition. Not all that difficult. It's just a slight extra step. I'm also tempted to go back and do what we had in the GeoPack standard where those pavement buildup levels were just on non-plot levels, so that would make it really obvious that they shouldn't be there. One other possible future item change, obviously, if we're not showing the top pavement, we really don't want to annotate the pavement cross slopes either. I think I have a workflow or a change to that annotation group that should work. I'm not sure that it's completely foolproof yet. So I'd like to play around with it some more, but we might see that in the future update. So we'll see. If you have something that you've been using and you'd like to share, I'd love to see it, see what you've been doing to make that work. But we need to keep it as generic as possible and meet or try to accommodate as many different scenarios as we can. So that's all I have for this. And I think we got some questions. That's what I was going to ask. Oh, do you want me to flip over?
So some questions that came in online. Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer. I don't know if you do, but is the XGL number set to Calibri Light?
Yes, it is.
So Sam Dudek said, I see you are not showing pavement layers.
Very observant, Sam.
That was before he prompted your conversation.
Okay.
Do we still need XGL PGL points in the corridor to trigger these earthwork tables?
Oh, that's a good question. No, you do not. But that was a change we made a while ago, right? I think so. At least the update before last.
Yeah, we moved it to grid to be a part of the grid annotation.
Yeah, that's a good question, but yeah.
Used to, yeah. If you didn't have those 2 points, we also had that EW something point that you could add, but no, it's now a part of the grid annotation. Let's see here. So does I want to see cross slopes on okay, so well, I guess
On that.
pretty hit on that one. With that,
Stephen.
Much work is probably more than twice.
Sheets formulated.
Yeah. Hash lines are, yeah.
Really loves editing this learn. He loves it. I get that. minutes.
It's just, yeah. Just come back. It's fine.
Regional. Just want to jump on, jump back in.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. That ain't better. 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 Sorry. Nothing's working today. You're left to break down. If What's in that is what we modeled to. Dimensional representation of an object. So it's 2D versus 3D. Measurement the size, shape, orientation, reliability of how that model element interfaces with other objects. And when we say that, I mean, how does the asphalt interact with the current concrete curb that's adjacent to it, or how does the column that it's inside of? And another feature that's Something where, a certain component was recalled, or the manufacturer had some issues with certain types of products, we can go just query where those are all at in the state and do whatever action needed to be taken there. So there was also a nice matrix that was included in the report, and it's kind of helps summarize everything that I just said, a little bit easier to kind of look at. But you kind of have to also understand those definitions to understand where each dot falls and what's happening there. So then model element breakdown is kind of the organization of the elements within that model in their LOD at different submission or stages within that project lifecycle. So it kind of categorizes into groups and classes to kind of further standardize that BIM implementation. So through MEB tools, that LOD can be communicated to downstream users. So what we received is kind of an example in the report was a Texas example or TxDOT example. And here you can see they have their item specification number on the left, and then they have the description and what LOD is. The LOD column is there in the middle. And then beside that is whether that item is included in that project or not. So we took, or our MOB tool or our spreadsheet was created with kind of the same idea, broken up into the ODOT CMS categories. So just based on our pay items, just sort of like Texas was, just seems to make sense to keep everything all aligned together. And the intent of this tool is just for design teams to refer to this to make sure we're meeting the target LOD thresholds, either for a project or just as a standard for all deliverables for ODOT. Guess I'm not sure how we're going to achieve all of this yet. Is it going to be an overall standard, thou shall do this for these items, or is it always going to be a project will determine that LOD? But we're eventually, the idea would be that this project level tool would document what or how our model was derived or created, so we could pass that on to the contractor so they understand what they're getting in that model-based deliverable. So ours kind of looks like this, very similar to what you just saw. Sorry if it's a little bit harder to see, but you'll see on the right, before I get there, it's the spec number on the left, the model name or the item name. There is a column that says included with project, and then there's the LOD minimum there. Some of them say not applicable. Obviously, if we don't need to model those items or they're not a pay item. You see this example as tack coat as being 200, and then prime coat be 300. I'm not sure what the difference would have been. But anyways, on the right, then we have different submittals. So these potentially could change whether you're at 30, 60, 90, or your final federated model type submittal. So the report also kind of identified what some of our ODOT's next steps need to be or should be. We need to create task groups or work groups to go through and review this table. So each kind of discipline or office at ODOT, we really need to get with them and sit down and get concurrence from, say, Office of Roadway Engineering or Hydraulics or Structures to make sure they concur with what we've developed or what was developed, and move that forward and make a standard table there. We omitted the structures table, structures items from that just to kind of save some time. And at this time, we're not really modeling our structures, so it just it seemed to be an easy way to cut some schedule up or save some time there on the schedule. But then we also need to kind of validate all these LOD definitions and MEBs through pilot projects. So start to identify some of those. Some of these may align with the ADCMS grant projects. We don't know, not quite sure how that's all going to play out. But, and then obviously change management for any of this model-based delivery and LOD implementation is going to be extremely difficult to get everyone on board. So stay tuned. That was really just meant to be an overview of what was done. Some things you're going to start to see or hear, not only at ODOT, but throughout the industry. And I happened to join this webinar yesterday through HEAP with the Highway Engineering Exchange Program. This was talking more about the level of information need and the ISO 19650 standard. If you really want your head to spin when you're done with it, go watch that webinar. But it was really good. And that was also presented by one of the Baker colleagues, as well as who else was on there? HDR, is that right? Yeah. Any questions on that?
We did get the audio fixed, it looks like.
Okay. Good, because I don't have any more answers for that. I'd have to defer to Joe over there. All right. My last topic, and probably is going to take a few more minutes out of your day, but I'll try to make it quick. I wanted to talk about plan quality. And when we put the agenda together, there was a lot of things going on, and I had a lot of different ideas of what we wanted to talk about and share. So kind of circle back here, and we just wanted to start out with preventable plan quality errors and emissions are starting to be observed at all stages of the project's life cycle. So these are getting communicated back through various ways through ODOT. ODOT's also been in discussion with ACEC. How can we make our plans better or get better quality? What do we need to do better? QA, QC. So you're going to start to see and hear more about this coming up in the future here. And contractors, we know that contractors are starting to build more risk into their bids because of plan quality errors that they're seeing. So this is not just an ODOT problem, it's an industry-wide kind of issue going on. This is an article that was on not ACC, on LinkedIn about a year ago, maybe just less than a year ago, that I happened to stumble across one day that was titled, "Why Are Drawings Getting Worse?" or "Why Are Design Drawings Getting Worse?" It's not a very long read, so I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. I did sort of summarize some of this, and it's really all the things that you might think about. Today's teams, you sort of have a practical loss of hands-on knowledge. I think a lot of the ideas here was these folks, all the people who contributed to this were probably folks that started in construction and then went back into the office, were doing design. But the points are still valid. We might be sharp on software, but we kind of lack that practical construction knowledge. I think it would be awesome if everybody could go out into the field and spend a couple years building some stuff, but it just doesn't happen. It's not very practical for that to happen either. Those first two bullets are about the same. People working their way up, learning construction before moving in design roles. They sort of suggested that the shift, that drawings may look really nice and polished, but they don't maybe consider some of the practical challenges that arrive on site. Things like, will a crane fit here to place these beams for this bridge? And if you're on the downtown project, can they get the equipment in to do what you're asking them to do? Over-reliance on automation and BIM tools. I first saw this and I was kind of a naysayer of what they read, and I thought about it for a while. unwanted side effect of this might be a lack of critical thinking when it comes to the drafting part of it. Remember, I'm a drafter by trade. That's what I went to school with to do. So my plan preparation is something I think about.
You remind us of that a lot.
So I'm not trying to criticize anyone's design, but when it comes to that, it's like, oh, yeah, maybe I am over relying on what I'm modeling here. Maybe I'm spending too much time to do that. Or maybe that drawing just misses the big picture, right? Because I spent all this time modeling it, but I don't know how to convey it now. So the last bullet point is like drawings become muddled when using powerful software like ORD. And so we have so many things going on. The cross-section example I think about when I read this was you have a skewed storm sewer that goes through your cross-section. Back in the olden days, we just drew a circle where it crossed, right? Now you've got this big oval that goes through. Technically, it's right, but now your drawing is very confusing, and you might have all kinds of things overlapping, and it's very hard to sort of convey that to somebody in the field. Speed versus quality. I also came from consulting, so I know we're often all being pushed to do more with less time. It's always a race against time to get things done, and the quality kind of suffers of our drawings. The modeling can also be rushed, so we might miss or lack some of the reviews, not only the modeling that we're doing, but also the drafting that we're doing, the plans production. So hopefully some of that stuff can be skipped over, leading to rework or delays that might not be caught until they get out to the field. How many of you would agree with this statement that remote work and loss of in-person mentorship has contributed to some of this? Only one person? 2? 3? Come on, gotta be more. What's remote work? Yeah, so I mean, this was happening before COVID. It's not a COVID pandemic thing. Remote work was happening. People were starting to work from home. But it's definitely changed how we receive training and mentorship and how we give that mentorship. An online meeting and emails just can't do the same thing as being in person and standing over someone's shoulder or smacking them on the back of the head when they're not listening to what you're trying to tell them. So junior designers, younger drafters just aren't kind of getting the same mentorship that we had, and it's kind of coming out in some of the plans that we're seeing. Kind of related, obviously, sort of related to speed and time and schedule here, but budget cuts and cheaper, faster kind of thing. Again, we're cutting our budgets, and quality is obviously always going to be sacrificed. Less time, fewer staffing resources even. And again, it's going to get down to that drawing quality. When I put this together, the example I thought about is some of the PMs used to come to me and say, give me your level of effort for this project and production. And I would give X number of hours per sheet, say 16 hours per sheet. And they would put the proposal together and say, no, we're going to do 12 hours per sheet. And then our client would look at it and say, no, you're getting 8 hours per sheet. So at the end of the day, when I ended up being the one producing it, and it's kind of, you're going to get what you pay for. You didn't give me the time to do it. So whether it's was my company or the client deciding to do it, how many of you have said that? Well, you're going to get what you pay for, ODOT, if you're not going to pay us to do extra. So obviously that cuts down on time and availability for quality control as well. But at the end of the day, there's just kind of the get it done mentality, right? How many of you have said, well, they'll figure it out in the field and you just make something work on the plan? We've all been there. And then that they figure it out in the field by sending an RFI back to the office or a change order. And that's kind of what we're starting to see more of. That's really the gist of that there. So the idea here was, let's maybe get back to some basics, some drafting 101, This is really right out of LND section 1202. I want to see an honest show of hands here and online. How many of you are familiar with 1202 in volume 3? A third of you here. What are we getting online? Anybody raising their hand? Oh, I have it here. All right. So I guess my point is then you guys need to take a look at this, please. I realize it's not the Bible of all drafting standards, but it really provides some really good guidance on basic things that are often done poorly. So for those of you who raised your hand, when was the last time you actually went and reviewed it? Right? You probably look at volume 1 every so often, right? There's more changes to design standards or as you're designing things. And last year, 6 months? No. And when was the last time you shared that with a colleague and said, hey, Tess, go look at 1202.3 to figure out how to label this thing, right? I don't know, I'm just using an example. Tess, sorry. No, there was nothing intended there. Come on now. All right, so my ask here is that you guys take a look at this. In all seriousness, it will hopefully help your plan quality, just in your appearance of your plans, improve, hopefully help some of your younger designers and drafters improve the quality of their plans. Let's be honest, if your product looks lousy, what are people going to think about your design? So here I just went through and highlighted in bullet points. Since most of you haven't looked at this in a while, I'm going to force you to if you're still paying attention. 1202.1 plan scales. Keep in mind, all of our drawings are produced for a full-size plan at 22 by 34, and almost all the time reduced to 11 by 17 print. So keep in mind that the guy in the field or the person in the field is most likely going to have an 11 by 17 piece of paper there with them. A mentor of mine once told me a long time ago, if you can't take that drawing, crinkle it up and spill a little bit of coffee and dirt on it and make a photocopy of it, it's not good enough. So make sure that it's not overly cluttered, everything is legible. These are the recommended drawing scales that are in here. Obviously, there's exceptions, these are the recommended scales. Again, keep in mind that 1 to 20 scale is at 22 by 34. So you're going to see that on your 11 by 17 it's going to be 1 to 40. Lettering, yeah, we called text lettering when we did it on the board. So the lettering should be oriented in such a manner that can be read either from the bottom of the sheet or the right side of the sheet. So if we turn that sheet 90 degrees, that's how we should be able to read it. So I'll be oriented one way or the other. Cross-section grid lines. We don't do too much of the minor grid lines anymore, but the idea here was to make sure that anything you had was not being lost in the cross-section grids or the profile grids. And then the rest of these are a lot of the drafting conventions. How should we place our text orientation on inclined lines or angled lines? Most of these, this one, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but the one in these ones in the upper left and lower right, I could kind of, I guess depending on where that line is, I could kind of buy it or not. But it's the idea of turning your head this way versus that way. And usually you want to turn it this way, right? Because that's where your title block is. So I'm turning my head, for those of you online, I'm turning my head to the left because your title block text is oriented that direction. Placement of leaders from notes. I see this a lot on even the support requests that we get. And sometimes I'll comment on it. Other times it's not really what I was asked to help with, but leader line should be from the top or the first line or the top line on the left or the last or bottom line on the right. And the line should usually be an inclined or an angled line, straight line. Where space prohibits, we can use a curved but the curved leader line, oops. But that curved line should be smooth and simple. And we have some examples in there of what it should be as well. So the top four are kind of the correct examples. The bottom are the incorrect examples. I personally also am not a fan of the note being right justified the way MicroStation does it when the leader is coming off of the bottom right. I think it's hard to read. But per the L&D, that is acceptable or correct. Placement of leader lines to or from circular objects. That leader line basically should extend radially as if it were to extend through the center of that circle. We see these with quantity balloons, typical section balloons. It's not the end of the world, but it does make it look a lot nicer when they're nice and neat. Terminators are your arrowheads or some other line termination here, like you see on the typical section layers there. They should terminate with an arrowhead when pointing to an object or to an edge. It should terminate as shown when pointing to a surface or layer, meaning that we have the little squiggly terminator or the dot when we're pointing to either the inside of a shape or the top of a surface here, like you see. So placement of your balloons, whether this is mostly related to typical sections, should be aligned as nice and neat as possible. Leader lines extend from the bubbles to the pavement layers, should be vertical where possible. Other items like guardrail and under drains, I still think it should be nice and straight and neat, although this says they could be angled and or inclined. And this says all leader lines should end with a terminator. I could give or take the terminator on at least the typical section here when you're pointing to like the prime coat and tack coat. Just adds one more thing to overlap stuff there. But the top are the preferred configurations. On the left one, can't quite fit all of those bubbles beside each other, so they're staggered like that or offset. Obviously on the right side, they're kind of all lined up nice and neat. And the bottom are very ugly. And I have seen some of those on some drawings recently. So overdrafting, this is, where you've got just text and dimensions overlapping other elements on your drawing, other lines, other text, other leader lines even. So it's obviously preferable to place dimensions outside the area in which they contain cross-hatching or other line work. Cross-hatching or line work should be broken out around text. That is usually pretty easy with masked text. I guess that's one advantage to that. But the hatch line should never go through it, or certain critical line work elements such as center lines may pass through text. But this doesn't give you permission to put masked text over any other line work. That's important. Like avoid overlapping the text like on your pavement or your edge of pavements, edge of shoulders. I've seen drawings where so much masked text, I can't even see the detail that someone's trying to convey on there. So these are the examples that are in the L&D. The top left is preferred there where the 6-inch typical dimension is outside of the hatching. You can see where the hatching was broke through the station in the bearing there, where the other ones, the lower left is kind of acceptable. I would still lean towards that being incorrect if you asked me. And then the other one on the right is just ugly. Placement of dimension text. This is where I don't think anyone's really ever had a great training, or you can do all the training you want with nice square objects, but when we don't really have square objects on our drawings, you know, our lines, our roads are curved and things. So unless you're doing bridge detailing, some of these, we kind of have to bend the rules a little bit. So horizontal text should read parallel to the bottom of the page. Vertical text should read parallel to the right edge of the sheet. I already said that at the beginning, so it just says it again. Text and dimension strings should be placed at the same level. So if you have a string of dimensions, they should all be together, not staggered up and down. I skipped the top bullet point. Text should be placed above the solid line and oriented parallel to the line. So these are the preferred methods here. With the dimension text above the line here, rather than being in the middle of the line, you can set, you know, any CAD software to put that text wherever you want. This is really the generally preferred way of doing it. Where you have text that doesn't fit between the dimension lines, say in the middle here, that 0.5 feet, you know, is brought up and has a little bit a leader pointing to it. If you can fit it in there with the terminators being outside, you know, you could do that too. The one on the far right, I just wanted to point out, this is kind of the preferred way to place a dimension where, you know, you might not have other room to do that. I would still probably place it with the text being vertical there, or, you know, but if you had to rotate it for some reason or another, that's how ideally you would want to show it. Avoid these configurations. So most of these are just showing the text in the middle of the line. I've seen the example here with that 10.25 foot dimension. It's just off to the side with some weird leader. We've got some weird ones here where the 0.5 doesn't fit in the middle. Some ugly leaders or just a piece of text in there. I don't know exactly what that is. So crowded dimensions and crowded conditions. These examples are not all that crowded, but I think they're overly exaggerated. Hopefully they get the point across. If you had, say, I'm looking at this 4 foot dimension that's in the middle here. Obviously, in the real world, hopefully you would just put the terminators on the inside of the dimension or extension lines. But what this is showing is maybe in a case where you can't fit that, you have the lines on the outside. You can break those extension lines where the dimension lines would cross. But rule of thumb is never break a dimension line. It's okay to break an extension line. So dimensioning of other objects, shorter dimensions are always nearest to the object line. Crossing, I just said, crossing extension lines is acceptable. And the reason that's a bullet point there is we've seen a lot of times where people try to break their extension lines when they cross each other. It's just a lot of extra effort and doesn't really do any good. Dimension lines should never cross an extension line. Extension lines should not be shortened, and I'll show that on the example here. Dimension lines should never coincide or form a continuation of any line of the drawing. Oops. And then if possible, they should always be placed off of the object. So the correct example was the upper left here. And we're looking at the dimensions at the lower right of the shape, where the extension lines cross each other. The shorter dimensions are on the inside, where the longer dimension is on the outside. And there's a nice gap between the object line and where the extension line begins. Over to the right, you can see where it says no, the extension lines were shortened. So we can assume where it's pointing to or should be pointing to, but that's not the standard there. Every now and then, you probably have a lot going on. You may end up having a dimension inside an object here, but as a rule of thumb, you're going to avoid that as much as possible, especially all three of these dimensions being in there. And you can see this one on the lower left, this horizontal dimension is an extension of that little line on the bottom of the shape. So it's kind of hard to tell where that begins and ends. And then the lower right, here's where you have the longer dimension is on the inside. So you have extension lines crossing dimension lines. So this is now, this section is talking about crossing dimension lines. And it was talking about extension lines should not be broken, like I had said before. Lines should not be centered at object edge lines. I can't remember what that one was referring to. And crossing extension lines is acceptable, but really what's trying to be conveyed here on this object on the right is that you can see this rectangle in the upper right of the example. The extension lines cross the object lines down to the bottom and to the right of the object and dimension the outside, whereas the bottom part of the example, the extension lines are being broken out or broke gaps. So I don't really know what those are. It's kind of hard to see. The over on the top for the circle, the left dimension or both of those dimensions go to the center of the circle. But you'll see on the bottom part again, the extension line is broken through through that object line, which is not preferred there. Then we get into group dimensions, like typical sections. I'm going to want those grouped nice and evenly. I meant to say it on one of the other ones. If you read a real drafting textbook or manual, there's I can't remember what it is, like 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch from the object should be your first dimension, and every one after should be 1/2 inch above it or something like that. So I'm not too worried about the actual spacing, but more so the consistency where every line of text or every line of dimensions is above the first one is consistently spaced. We see them kind of stacked up or staggered. It really is hard to read and quite frankly, just ugly. So here's an example of that. If I had my way, I'd probably flip-flop this overall dimension of the lane to be at the very top, but that's one of the examples there. Obviously, there's obviously exceptions to the rules, but these are all pretty good examples of what we're hoping for. And then last here is the use of the word typical, especially for symmetrical type drawings and details. We encourage that because we don't want to see all the extra annotations and things. Perhaps one of those dimensions or radius here, one of these details changes, but you only change one side, not the other. So if we only label it one place, we don't have that redundant information. And kind of just clutters up your drawing too. So I didn't go through every single section there, but again, my ask is that you go just for the sake of making your plans look nice. Go take a look at that. Try to share it with some of your younger colleagues. And, hopefully we can get our plan appearance improved a little bit. And then lastly, like I said, I am a drafter. This textbook on the left is what I've had since the 90s. There's the 9th edition that was, I think it was originally published in the 1930s. It still exists today. This 16th edition on the right just came out a couple years ago. I don't really track this. I just happened to look the other day. So what is this book still out there? But if anyone would like to buy it for me, I would love to have it. No, I can't accept it. Never mind. I can't. No, I actually may purchase this myself because now they've started to introduce like some 3D stuff into here. So, but the table of contents looks exactly the same. So the point I was trying to get at is over all these years, these drafting standards really haven't changed, and we really should be sticking to them. I think overall it'll make the quality of your product look much better, or all of our products, and we'll tackle some of the other plan quality issues that we're seeing some other day. But you're going to start to see this more from ODOT in the future. So that's all I have. Any questions on that? All right, everyone wants to leave, so you can clap and get out of here. Anything else?
All right, just thanks for everyone online, bearing with us with the audio issues, and everyone for coming out today. I will see what I can get posted for the recording. I should have at least the second half of the day, so it might take a little long to get posted, but we'll post the PowerPoints. So thanks for coming out.